Hey, good afternoon. Apologize for a slight few seconds delay there. I had a technical glitch I was working on. So, welcome. We are so excited to welcome you to today's webinar on effective tools to help your clients cope with crisis. So, before I get too far, let me just, for those of you who can either raise your hand or hit me in the chat box, let me know if you can hear me. Okay, awesome. I've got some hands going up. Um, okay, great. All right, yes, awesome. Thank you all. I appreciate it. So that just wanted to make sure that you know, now that we spend so much time on Zoom calls and other things, sometimes we're just chatting away and talking, and we find out we're on mute, and it's just not as fun. So thank you. And I want to check and make sure that you can actually see the first page of the presentation. So you can say yes in the question box for that. Okay, great. Got some yeses coming in. Thank you. All right, so let's jump right in and get started because we have a lot of good information that we want to share with you today, and I'm excited about having Tasha Matthews back with us today. She was with us last month and on Are You Okay? So today we'll take a little bit of a different approach as we look at tools to help your clients cope with crisis. So first of all, our copyright, just a reminder that all rights are reserved by Diversified Resource Network and its affiliates. The material developed for this presentation is the intellectual property of DRN and or its creator. Copying or reproducing this material for educational use is prohibited without written permission from Diversified Resource Network. And a reminder that the training is meant for educational purposes only. For additional information, please reference the handouts or the links that are provided. So I'm Christy Spence and I'll be your producer today. I've worked in the industry for some time with Bank of America, SunTrust, which is now Truist, American Express, and some others. I've been with DRN for about 2 years, and I am happy and excited about the information that we'll share today, and I hope that you find it extremely useful in your counseling endeavors. This webinar is being brought to you today by DRN, your one-stop resource center. We provide webinars to expand your knowledge of industry changes, updates, headline news, grant opportunities, and so much more. We also promote the national industry standards for homeownership education and counseling, and you'll find our DRN URL at the bottom of the presentation. So feel free to bookmark that page and come visit us often to see what we may have coming up and what resources are available to you on our website. Let's go over just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started today, and I turn the time over to Tasha. Want to make sure that you have, if there's an issue here, you have the call-in number, the access code, and the webinar ID so that you can get back into the training. I'll also say rest assured, if for some reason you get cut off or something comes up over the next hour and a half, we will send out a copy of today's recording to everyone who is attending today. So I'll make sure that I get that out to you this evening. But should you need to dial back in, feel free to do so. Make sure that you have your computer audio checked if you're trying to listen through your laptop. A lot of you have already found the question box. I will answer questions as we go, but we will use the question box today in our interactions as we share with Tasha your feedback and those kinds of things so that we can have some interaction as we're going through the content today. A couple of you have reached out and asked if we had handouts. Again, I'll just say that we're going to send the recording out after today's presentation, and it will be available for your use. We also ask that you take a few minutes and just respond to our survey. Let us know what we did well, where we need to make changes, and let us know as we are moving into the fourth quarter, what kind of content and webinars you'd like to see next year as we are in planning mode for 2022. All right, Tasha, I'm going to turn it over to you and allow you to introduce yourself to our attendees today, and I will be here to support you in making sure that we keep the interaction alive and lively as we go through the content today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have the ability to move the slides?
You should.
Okay, let's see. Okay, yep. Well, everyone, thank you. Thank you. I am so happy to be here again, and I am definitely happy to be able to share this topic about effective tools to help your clients cope with crisis, but also help you provide amazing service to your clients. And so let's see here. I am looking for those controls. Christy, I was hovering and saw them, but then they kind of disappear on me a little bit. Let's see if I can.
Okay. Well, let me work on it, and I'll go ahead and advance you right now. Will that work?
Okay. Okay, I saw one, but I can't click on it. So yeah, we're going to improvise. That's how we do it, technology. So a little bit about me. I am a licensed professional counselor. I have a private practice in Lawrenceville, Georgia, where I work with adults, families, and youth. I also work with organizations on helping organizations identify wellness opportunities that will help their employees just live and work well. So some of our learning objectives for today, after we're done with this training, you should understand how to help your clients or your agency help clients cope during times of crisis and grief. So we're going to talk a lot about crisis and grief. You should gain an understanding on how grief and loss impacts your clients and agency. And then you're going to gain an understanding on some basic skills needed to build positive relationships with your clients. And then we're going to explore the importance of you as the counselor taking care of yourself. So those are some of the things we're going to discuss today. So we're going to take just a brief mindful moment, and I want you to take a look at these pictures. And as you begin to just slowly allow your eyes to just hover over each picture and take the experience of the picture in, we'll take a few moments to do that. And once you've looked at all of the pictures, I want you to kind of put in the question box or the chat what comes up for you when you see these pictures. What thoughts or feelings do you have when you look at these pictures?
Tasha, if it's okay, I'll start sharing with you some of the stuff that I'm seeing. I see
Sure.
stress, fear, anxiety, highs and lows, responsibility, isolation. Someone said all the stress from the pandemic. Youth spend too much time in cyber world. Somebody said stress, overwhelming. Someone else said I have forgotten how much stuff had happened in the last year. Parenting concerns, worrying about the cost of living, money, multitasking, disaster, illness. Somebody put in all caps, life.
Life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
thank you all for sharing. I wanted to start off with that because I think it will help us keep the perspective as we're talking about our clients. So if you are feeling all of this now, every caller, every client that you come in contact with feels this and three or four other things. So I want you to keep that perspective, keep some of the things you said close to your mind and heart, because as we begin to talk about clients, it's important for you to remember those perspectives as well. So thank you for sharing.
Ta- yeah, you can
Yes.
advance. Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
let's see.
There you go.
All right. So I wanted to start off with the view. We just talked about how you feel, but how do you view your clients? What lenses are you looking through? So we talked about all of the things that you experienced by looking at those pictures, and I want to just paint another story for you so we can really kind of keep things in perspective. And this is a personal story. I always like to start with some type of personal implication to the information because I am a counselor, although I'm not a housing counselor. I am a licensed therapist, so I am working with clients that you probably see as well as your particular client. So I want to share just a community story that I think will set the stage for our talk today. So this story is about me and my experience with neighbors that have moved out of the subdivision. So I've been in my subdivision for about 20 years, and my neighbor on the right and the left of me, up until about 2 years ago, had been in the subdivision as well. So the neighbor to the right of me, she is a single mother with a child who has a disability. And most of the time that I've known her, she has been underemployed, which means she works a lot of temporary jobs. She had been doing a lease to purchase option with her landlord. And throughout the year, she would work for a long period of time and then she would stop working for a long period of time. And so, because I was her neighbor, I would hear a lot of these stories from her. And so, last year, this time, she was evicted by her landlord and ended up in a extended stay for quite some time. I just remember her being very ashamed, having a lot of anger, having a lot of frustration about all of her hopes and dreams that went into home ownership. And so then if I move on to my neighbor to the left, um, he had been there for about 20 years, and he left our subdivision earlier this year. We all know what's going on with the housing market. And one of his reasons for leaving, although he didn't want to leave, is that he had experienced a very expensive divorce, and had no option but to move out of the subdivision. So he took all of the money, all of the proceeds that he got from selling his home above, what it was worth at the time, to move into another area, in a home that was more expensive, but not as attractive as the current home he lived in next to me. And so both of those experiences really helped me think about, how valuable your job is as a housing counselor. Um, if I think about the home in front of me, this will be my last example. This particular home was like a revolving door. I would see families come in and out, some that had problems with domestic violence, others that had problems with just keeping a job or maintaining different things here or there. And I would hear all of these different stories as I began to meet a lot of my neighbors that have since moved on. And so I share that because it's very important that when you're doing the work, that you're making sure that you are not only looking through the lens of a housing counselor, but really being very open and sympathetic to the clients that you serve. So I just want to share those examples as I move on. I do not see my controls. Let's see, here we go. All right. So as I stated in some of the examples, the clients that you serve come in with lots of different things that they've lost. We're talking about divorce. Sometimes they have issues with domestic violence. You may not know that when they're on the call or on the video with you. Um, you may hear that they have a sick child, there's some stress, a lot of mental health issues may be arising. And so there's a very large impact that debt and grief and loss has on the families that you serve. So you want to keep that in mind as you are holding space for callers or clients that may be calling you to get support. So let's look at the stages of grief. The stages of grief are often thought about when someone loses a loved one, a death of someone. But the stages of grief can really be transferable to any type of loss. And so we're going to just briefly go through some of these stages so we can really think about, when you're working with a client, what stage they may be in when you get that call. So denial is the first stage. So your caller or your client may be coming in and they are in denial that they're going to lose their home, or they may be in denial that they've lost a loved one, and that in turn will cause them to have some financial strain that could potentially cause them to lose their home. The next stage is bargaining, where they're trying to figure out, well, if I do these things over here, I may be able to keep my home. So they're going through a process of trying to figure out how to stay in their home, but it could be due to divorce. It could be due to the loss of a loved one, or could be due loss to a loss of employment as well. And then another part of the stage is anger. There's lots of emotions that go into losing a loved one, losing your job, losing the sense of normalcy. And then depression and acceptance are the stages as well. I'm going to show you another picture of these stages so you can really see them play out a little differently. Um, this talks about normal functioning, and it gives us some identified things that happen in each stage. And it would be nice if our clients that we work with and serve go through these stages one by one. But a lot of times, as they're entering and exiting the stages of grief, there's a lot of circular motion. And so they could be in shock and denial and go to acceptance and then go back to anger. Why is this important for you as the housing counselor? You're getting these calls. So it's very important for you to understand, if you get an angry caller that's frustrated, some of the things that they may be experiencing, so you can better serve them. Or also you can make sure that you're in a good place to be able to serve them. So these are just some of the stages that it's very important for you to know. Um, During times of crisis, here are some other things that are important for you to understand. Not so much that you need to do anything with it, but as people grieve, they have to acknowledge that they're not in the same place anymore. They have to also understand the nature of grief, and they may not understand that when you receive their call or receive them on video. Um, they may not have permission to grieve. So as you are listening to them, you may hear more about their loss than more about their grief and loss of losing someone or losing the sense of normalcy when you're trying to provide them information as they prepare for these home ownership challenges. And so these are just some of the things that you can think about as you are helping them throughout that process. The grief process, how we want grief to look and how grief looks for our clients is very different. And so it's pretty important, if you had any type of your own grief and loss, that you know that it's a circular process. It's kind of messy. And so you want to be empathetic when you're working with callers to understand some of those dynamics that go on in the background as well. So understanding how your clients make meaning of grief. Again, we talked a little bit about the stages of grief. Um, a lot of our clients have this loss of normalcy, and they are getting hit with, perhaps the loss of a job, perhaps the pandemic losses. They could also be experiencing the loss of a loved one all at the same time. And because we've had some collective grief, it's important for us to keep that in mind, still be able to do our jobs and serve, but also park and lot some of the thoughts that we understand and know about how grief affects each of our clients that we work with. So when we're talking about anticipatory grief, sometimes our callers or clients are considering what's going to happen in the future. So you may hear some of that language as you're trying to share information that they need to use now. You may hear them thinking about the future. During that time, it's important to suspend judgment and make sure that you're able to listen to their story as much as possible so you can see where they're at in these stages of grief. As I stated earlier, again, stages of grief are non-linear. They're not going from point A to point B to point C often. They're going from A to Z and back to D. So be very aware of how these stories are impacting you as you're listening to them. And then our clients are oftentimes making new meanings, new stages out of grief. And so you may have a caller where you feel like you understand what they're going through, and then the next caller, it may look different. So being able to, again, parking lot what you've identified as understanding of their crisis or grief, and then moving on to the next client to be able to serve them as well. All right. So we're going to take a moment and pause, and this is your time to share. How has grief and loss impacted your agency or the clients that you serve? And so Christy's going to share some of those responses so we can get a feel for how you've been impacted, how your clients have been impacted.
All right, I'm in the question box, and we'll give people a few seconds to type. Okay, I've got some things coming in um, about the impact of grief and loss. People are making rash decisions.
Hmm.
Um, Harder for the homeless to be rehomed. Isolation. Just a general increase in clients overall. Um,
Mm-hmm.
the impact on mental health and finances. Um, mm, Someone said clients were turning to alcohol. Sometimes it's how people try to cope with the loss, and is it a healthy coping or not? Um, and suffered anxiety, unrealistic thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm getting a lot of people are saying it's definitely impact on the clients and on the counselors.
Mm-hmm.
Someone said, and I think this is great, all the uncertainty makes everything a sense of urgency. Um,
Yes.
yeah, more people calling out, coping with substance abuse, irate thinking, a feeling of hopelessness.
Mm.
Yeah, so
Yeah, so thank you all for sharing, because I think it's important for us, for others, as we are sharing, to hear just some of the different ways our clients are um, needing to cope, some of the pressure that it puts on the counselor to see and work with more clients, and then for us to be able to serve in excellence, because that's really what we want to do, be able to serve clients and support as they go through these different transitions. So thank you for sharing. We're going to continue and move on here. All right. So this picture kind of represents grief as it pertains to crisis. And because we have always been resilient, whether it takes a longer to be resilient, we are a nation that has always had a crisis brewing. Once we finish with one crisis, whether it's big or small, um, there is a crisis brewing. And so I don't know if you just take a moment and can even remember back to 9/11, when we had the crisis of losing lives and new security challenges and all of those implications that came with 9/11, new measures and things of that nature, how we dealt with terrorism, um, any type of water, fire, or anything that's catastrophic. There has always been some type of protocol that was created for that crisis. Financial crisis, every 5 years or so, there's some type of crash, and it impacts so many different industries. And most crises do, they impact different industries. And now with our most recent crisis, COVID, and even racial trauma, even political crises always impact the work that we do as counselors on some level, whether it's based on the laws, mandates, moratoriums. And so it's important to realize that although your title is a housing counselor, you all, and even myself, we are really crisis managers. It is our job to identify the need with our particular client and do something about that crisis. And so one of the key, I would say, tools and resources to be a good crisis manager is to use humility. Humility is the core trait necessary for any successful crisis manager. And that's what I'm calling us right now, because we are holding space for every caller that comes in and every story that we hear. So we are crisis managers. And so being able to use humility, and compassion and empathy, really goes a long way when someone is struggling with all the things that we talked about. So a good crisis manager recognizes that these clients are calling in and they are having irrational thoughts. They're dealing with substance abuse and divorce and loss and all of those things. And we are holding the space for that. And so being a good crisis manager that has humility requires us to suspend judgment. I know a lot of times when we are having those individuals sit before us, we begin to get curious as to, perhaps why this person is in this place, but making sure that we are humble enough to know that on any given day, any of us can have a problem with housing or finances or grief and loss. So humility doesn't put you in the seat of the client, but it allows you to be humble enough to know that it can happen to you as well. So those are just some things to consider as you are doing your work as a crisis manager. So crisis intervention, this is a great picture. A lot of times our callers, or our clients come in and they're broken, and it is not our jobs to fix them, to give them all of the pieces, because we're not responsible for their life story, but we are putting band-aids, we're giving them resources, we're giving them hope just by our tone, just by our ability to listen. And so there's small things that we can do to provide a, a helping hand to our clients that we're serving. So as we think about crisis intervention, healthy ways to cope, again, I am trained as a licensed therapist and you are trained as a housing counselor. So you have a protocol that that have been set in place for you to work with your clients. So some of the things that you can be thinking about if you have an opportunity to guide clients, helping them focusing on what's important in the here and now. A lot of times, clients come to my office and they are all over the place with trying to figure out what they need to do 5 years from now. But what I try to do is help them have a mindful moment to be able to focus on the here and now. What is the next thing that they need to do to take care of their current crisis or current issue. Another thing that it's important for us to do is help them find support. So if there's resources that you can give them or lead them to, helping them um, use their own self-determination to find support. Doing that will lessen some of their stress response, and also giving them a place to be able to process their feelings. I know that, again, if you have a protocol, you want to be able to give them the necessary tools and resources to get back on track, but also they do sometimes need that space to process their feelings as well. So these are just, again, some healthy ways to help the clients we serve get the support that they need. So we're going to pause for a minute again, and I just want you to think of what words come to mind when you think about your clients in crisis. So we started in the beginning when you looked at the picture, and so maybe some different words have come up for you. What words come to mind when you think about your current client's crisis?
So we've got some things coming in, Tasha. Heartbreaking,
Mhm,
overwhelmed, unfortunate, pain, patience, again, that hopelessness, care,
mhm,
concern. They feel scattered, um, surviving. That was a great one. Anger, desperation, compassion.
mhm,
Um, just looking at it, the thing that seems to come up quite a bit is overwhelming anxiety. Um, People tend to be struggling, and there's always this sense of urgency. Um, how to help them make a breakthrough. They're upset, uh, worried. Um, I like this one. Somebody says it's complex. It's,
mhm.
maybe it's not as straightforward as we'd like it to be. Um, that's why I so like that slide that shows grief. We think it's in a straight line, but it's, more of a jumble, and you just don't go through life in a straight line. It's non-linear. I thought that was awesome. Um, I got some people saying, what's our first step? Roller coaster. And
Mhm.
another good one, it comes in waves, right? Again, talking about that cyclical nature. I like this up and down and all around. So
Oh, mhm.
those are the things that come to mind. Thank you all for taking the time to share in the question box with us. But, that's kind of what I'm sensing and seeing in the question box at this point.
Yes, yes. Thank you all. Thank you all. So I'm glad that you are in line with the emotional piece. I can tell that you all are passionate about what you do, and you probably feel your clients when they're calling in with some of these concerns. And so here are some other words that kind of really stand out as we are doing this work. Um, because you're counselors, some of the other things that kind of stand out, some of the words that um, are important for us to think about is the one that stands out for me, and we'll share a little bit about these words as well. What words stand out for you? The word eviction stands out for me as I was sharing the story regarding my neighbor to the right of me. Um, my neighbor across the street from me, I believe, also was recently evicted. But when I talked to the wife, probably 6 months ago, I can tell that this has been a process of normalcy for them, staying somewhere for 6 months and then moving on for another 6 months, having problems with the landlords and collections and things of that nature. Um, it's important for us to understand some of these dynamics and understand, how, a little bit about how our clients get to some of these places. So think about the words that are showing now, and tell me what comes up for you. What word stands out for you as far as, things that your clients maybe have discussed before?
Somebody said disaster, homelessness,
Mhm.
education, insecurity, moratorium, spending, housing, resources, no savings, delinquency,
Mhm.
crisis, uncertainty, um, frustration with all involved,
Mhm.
hunger. Um, Somebody said I'd like to add payday loans. We
Mm,
can do that. Yep, I think
yeah,
it's a great one.
I see
Um,
payday saving, but payday loans, yep, that's a good one.
yeah, vicious cycle, embarrassed, right? And
Yeah.
scams. That's a great one to call out. You know, housing costs. So those are some of those additional minimum wage, defeated. Thank y'all for sharing. We certainly appreciate it.
Yes, yes. So we're going to keep going because it's important for us to kind of think about money beliefs. This is a pretty important slide for me, and I could, probably do a whole training on money beliefs, and we all have them, but money beliefs is important today because it gives you an understanding of how your client perhaps got to this place. Now, with the crisis and the pandemic, a lot of people are losing their homes because they're losing their jobs, they're losing loved ones. And so we have to kind of parking lot the crisis in some cases because it's just kind of happening to a lot of individuals. But when you think about money beliefs, when I do this training for other professionals, there are some areas where you can think about these particular money beliefs. There's tons of them, but the ones that kind of stand out is if your clients grew up in awe of money, if your client grew up believing money was mysterious, if your clients grew up with money scaring them, or if your clients grew up with money deprivation, they could potentially impact their money belief in their money narrative as an adult. And so I'm just going to briefly read you some information about each of these money beliefs, and then we'll kind of move on. I just want you to have the insight. So when you're looking through those lenses in the future, you may be able to pick up some buzzwords that kind of guides you to understand a little better how your clients may have got to this place. So if you grew up in awe of money, in your client's family, um, that's all they really talked about. Money came first. They perhaps always talked about money. They probably always talked about how to make more money. After a while, for your client, money becomes the driving force. That client may feel pressured to always make more money. And in turn, if they can't make more money, then they could end up doing things that could cause them some harm. So, because money is always the emphasis, they may not be looking at, some of the softer skills, or how to maintain their mortgage, or how to maintain these other things, because they're always focused on money. So it's all or nothing. You either have a lot of money or you have no money. If your client grew up believing money was mysterious, um, they could also believe money just magically appeared or disappeared. So again, this is your client that may be calling in. They may be panicked when they talk to you because a lot of times it's a money roller coaster that they're on. And so you may hear some of that in the call, just about their anxiety about not having enough money to keep their home, or not having enough money to pay for other things that contribute to the household. If your client grew up with money scaring them, there may be a lot of anxiety in that call. You may hear a lot of anxiety about them, again, scared to make a decision. Maybe you're talking them through a process and they're just full of anxiety. So that gives you some insight on where that belief came from and how to support them, either by listening or guiding them on that call. And then money deprivation. You may have clients that you're seeing that never really had money, and so they're struggling with, the value of money and the value of home ownership. And so, again, I'm giving you little snippets of this, but money beliefs are very important for the counselor to understand. So when you're sitting before someone, again, you're looking through the lens of the client and not through the lens of the counselor. So I hope that is helpful for you as we are continuing on, to be able to help the clients that you serve. There's also financial triggers that come up, and we talked about a few of those triggers in the beginning. Definitely, work is a financial trigger for a lot of individuals. So, not having a job, being underemployed, being dissatisfied with the type of work, that is a financial trigger that impacts housing and impacts your client's ability to maintain their home. Another area is family, being able to support their family. Families are complex these days. There's step families, there's kids living with adult parents, and some of those dynamics you may hear in your call. So making sure that you're being sensitive to the family dynamics of your clients that you serve as well. Then you think about friends, and this one is in here because a lot of times there is some parallel process to, my friend has this particular home or this particular condo, and so I want to do the same thing. So friends and outside influences, whether it's social media or wanting to be more than you are, comes into effect when you're thinking about how your client is now in a crisis to keep their home. So again, not that you can do anything about that, but it's helpful for you to understand some of the triggers that you wouldn't think a client can cope with as you are talking to them as their housing counselor. And then just relationships ending, relationships not being satisfied, people deciding to part. Again, this impacts the work that you do with your clients as well. So these are some financial triggers that could cause your clients to have to cope in a different way as well. Let's see. So here's some facts. We're talking about the debt there, and on that screen, it looks like it maybe cut off a little bit. Um, so American households in debt, we see that 87% of American households are in debt. Again, why this statistic is important for you is because it impacts the type of calls that you receive, the type of support. I think someone mentioned that there's a lot more clients to serve now. It'll probably be that way for quite some time as we look at the secondary impacts and the all of the things that are going to come from the pandemic and all of the changes at employment and things of that nature. We will probably see this number increase. So it's important for you to keep those statistics in mind, and in most cases pack your patience as you are serving clients as well. So how does this impact you, and how can you engage clients? And so when I talk about coping techniques, effective coping techniques to work with your clients, I am not giving you anything that's not already out there in the free world and things that you may already be doing. Um, but when I went through my counseling program, I was shocked to recognize that a lot of these skills I already had. And so, really, what we're talking about is the human experience, being able to provide some basic skills. If you don't have these basic skills, if you have these basic skills already, a lot of this stuff is overview for you. But when clients are calling and they're angry, a lot of times it's easy to forget how to listen or forget how to attend. So I'm going to just go through these skills. If you already have them, um, check it off the list and say, I am doing that. If you need a refresher in these skills, here is your refresher. So 9 skills to support client engagement. I have to use these as a counselor on a daily basis, and it's important for you to use them as well. So listening, attending to what they're saying. So orienting oneself physically to the client. This indicates that you have some awareness, you care about what they're saying, you're giving them your undivided attention and care. So I know that we all have been, for most of us, we've been working virtually for quite some time. Others, you've been face to face and not been virtually. But do know that even if you're not in front of a client, they can tell if you are attending to what they're saying. Um, and so it's important for you to think, it's important for you to understand that even if you're not in front of the client, they know if you're not paying attention. So don't think that the video or the phone call hides that. So um, listening and observing, making sure that your environment is conducive for you to listen. So if you're working in offices with others, you're making sure that the environment around you is conducive, meaning no distractions, making sure that you are in a place where you can focus, i.e., closing out all of those tabs, turning off, music and other distractions, because clients are aware when you're not focused. Being able to have some empathy. Empathy is the ability to perceive another's experience and then communicate that perception back to the individual to clarify and amplify their own experience and meaning. So it's not assuming that you know what they're going through. It's not giving them your story about when you went through it, but it's making sure that you can empathize. But before you empathize, you need to make sure you understand. So to do the pieces of empathy, you have to be able to attend. You have to be able to paraphrase. Sometimes we're getting a lot of content and it's heavy. And so you can't go through their whole story again. You have to be able to pick out the pieces that's relevant to your role, but also important to your client. You want to be able to reflect the feelings. What I heard you say, that must be a difficult feeling. So that leans in, it allows you to lean in, and it allows them to understand that she is listening, he or she is listening to my frustration and that I am being heard. You may be the only person that they have in this moment that's listening to what they're experiencing. And so make sure that you are planting some seeds and you're dropping some opportunities to make their life better, just by you holding space for them. Number 3, having some genuineness, making sure that you're genuine about your concern. Sometimes I think this is a challenge when we're going through our own stuff, and we're going to talk about ways that you can make sure that you're managing your own stuff so you can really be genuine. Having unconditional positive regard, that means that in this human experience that you are really unconditionally regarding their process as being important. You want to make sure that you are concrete, that you're using open questions to get some of the information that you need. You also want to make sure that if you have an opportunity to self-disclose and it's beneficial to your client, that you do that. That does help build relationships. And then information given and removing obstacles to change is pretty important as well. Let me see if I can go back one. Oh, yep, this is the next one. So the next one is, I gave you all those areas. Uh-oh, I lost one. Okay, so I gave you some basic skills that you can use to help your clients to cope, but there's always barriers that we have to address as well. The first barrier is the lack of desire to explore. Um, we all know that sometimes we're working with clients and we don't have a desire to dig a little deeper to find out. So sometimes we have no interest in exploring. So this is a lack of desire to explore. So it's an interpersonal barrier that impacts your relationship with your clients. Lack of participation, not wanting to engage in the communication with your client. That causes the relationship to be a little skewed, and it impacts your ability to serve. Cultural barriers, whether it's your cultural barrier or your client's cultural barrier, making sure that if you recognize that there's a cultural barrier, that you are leaning in and making sure you understand that client so that you're not judging what you hear. Um, the other areas, unusual medium, whether that is using video or using phone or using a platform that is not really helpful for you getting the information that you need from your client. It's very important to make sure that whether it's face to face or over video, that you have your technology in place so that you can serve at the most optimal level. Then attitude barriers. Attitude barriers arise when it has to do with either your attitude barriers, some of your individual habits, or your potential clients' habits as well. So just keeping those things in mind when we're thinking about personalities and things that can be annoying to you as you're working with clients, making sure that you make a note to self that these things are issues for you that arise when you are talking with clients, so you can kind of address those. And then we have language barriers. That kind of is, I would say, a close cousin to the cultural barriers, making sure that if you have a difficult time understanding, that you ask for clarity, you slow the call down, you ask permission to ask additional questions so that some of these interpersonal barriers will be decreased. So some of the interpersonal skills, there are 11 developmental tools. You want to be able to create a positive outlook. So again, you may be the only person that your client talks to, and so you want to make sure that you're creating a positive outlook. It doesn't have to be a fake outlook, but the opportunity to create that positive outlook is pretty important as well. Having control over your emotions is very important. You can't control your client's emotion, but making sure that you have your emotions in check. Be confident about the knowledge that you have, and be confident about your ability to support and hold space for them. Make sure that you are focusing on your communication skills. I've given you some tools and tips that may be refreshers for you. Um, Avoid interrupting. I'm kind of picking out the ones that I feel are most important. Avoid interrupting your clients as they're talking. Try to hold space for their story, allowing them to give you the information that they feel is most valuable for them. We talked a little bit about reducing physical barriers. The physical barrier could be if you're in face to face, some of the dynamics within your office. Avoid distractions. If you are multitasking, make sure that you are avoiding some of those distractions, and then show the caller that you are listening. And so these are some of the interpersonal skills that will help you build and maintain a healthy relationship with your clients. So we have a couple of case scenarios here that we just want to kind of process and give you time to share with us what skills you may use, if this has been your client before, how you manage this client, and what you would do. So this particular client is a single mom who's being evicted from her apartment. She has 2 children and uses public transit as their primary transportation source. Children are homeschooled and they are failing. Mom is unable to help with schoolwork. So this is the call that you received. How would you support this client by either using some of the skills that we talked about or some other skills that you may have? So I'll let Christy kind of share so we can all kind of know how we would support this client.
Yep. And let's give people a moment. Those answers might be a little lengthy, but you
Okay.
all take your time and take a moment, and I'll pick a few to share. But one of the skills, and someone has already shared, is to empathize and be reflective.
Mhm.
Right? You gotta be empathetic to her situation. And while y'all are typing, certainly you've got to identify the resources and the helps that come from the housing counselor side, but this is also the other side of what we do in trying to help people. Um, Somebody said also start by being empathetic and non-judgmental. Listen so
Mhm.
you can get the full story, um, and then help to find the proper resources to begin to address their needs. Like you said before, listen, um, help solution, um, guide them to ask the school if they have some additional helps, explore primary concerns, validate, empathize, and listen.
Mhm.
Um, and I would break it down by each need. Yep. Spoken like a true counselor. um,
Yes.
be a change agent. I thought that was a great way to put it together. Um, Share the resources that you're familiar with. Again, break out those needs and start to figure out which ones to address. Um, I hear what I hear and what I'm looking at is help to bring and restore some order.
Mm.
Um, what people are saying, they've not used that specifically, but the steps that they're sharing say, let's empathize, let's listen, let's, get all of those things on the table, and let's see if we can help bring order for this person. Um, Let me think. Let me read a couple more. Um, and I'm so thankful to have this group today because everybody has also picked up on um, the importance of connecting them with resources and
Mhm.
and getting them referred to where they need to be. Because we know in our agencies that sometimes we don't have all of the resources in house, but we endeavor to know what resources are out there so that we can connect clients with the help that they need. Um, Listen as much as the client needs. Um, connect them with emergency rental assistance. Check with the school. Picking out the other things. Mental wellness entity. Yep. So you make all of those referrals, right? Um, Create a safe and comfortable environment.
Mm.
So I think they've heard you, and I think y'all are giving some great feedback. Thank you for taking the time to share in the question box. I know it's not always easy to type, but we certainly do appreciate it. Um, so yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We'll move on to scenario 2. A client has just been notified that they are being furloughed indefinitely due to COVID-19 business impacts. Their final work day will be 2 weeks from today. Client has no money saved, a 401k account with $40,000. At the end of the counseling session, the client makes a comment about how these programs are generally directed at the poor, and he has no expectation that he will get helped. Whew. This is a client. I just had this client last week, so I'm sure you all did. So how would you support this client? You know, I have clients come in my office all the time with this, and I am not their housing counselor, but I am their mental health counselors. But how would you support this client? Put your comments in the chat.
Yeah. And then we'll share them. Build up his trust. Yep. Because his comment certainly cues us into the fact that there might not be a high level of trust there. Provide hope. Let them know we all go through rough times and he's not alone. Reassure the client that with the current pandemic, the income limits are higher because all income levels are being impacted. I would tell them to seek out another counseling type, make them feel safe and heard, give them concrete services that can help. Remind him that getting assistance is not a shameful thing. Allow the client to vent and then encourage them to apply for unemployment. Yep. Provide community resources for them to turn to. Express empathy. Paraphrase and let him know that you're hearing him, and research and find those resources that speak specifically to what he's dealing with. Assist him with financial fitness. But everybody is cluing in on providing him resources. And I think you also touched on just being able to build trust, right? And not being judgmental. And maybe depending on how he made that comment, it's not being offended or upset that he made the comment. We've kind of talked about people are feeling a lot of stress and it might not come out nice, right? Explore family assistance. This is a good one. Honestly, I would encourage him to reframe his narrative on the term poor and explain that the entire nation is experiencing a crisis. Yeah.
Come through, counselor.
Absolutely.
Oh, those are some great
Yeah.
examples of how to support. And I'm sure this example is probably very similar to a lot of the calls that come in. I like, Christy, when you talked about not taking a defense. And I would say also not matching the emotion that the client comes with and not taking it personal. They don't know you, but right now you are holding space for them. So making sure that you are able to hear what they're saying, even though you may feel what they're saying. So being able to separate the feelings from the content is very important. If you have the ability to reframe and to support, if you have the emotional intelligence to be able to manage your emotions, whether they manage theirs or not, it's very helpful to it will be helpful for this client. So you all gave some great examples on how to support. And as we're talking through these examples, the reason why I wanted to have the self-care piece at the end, it made more sense to put it at the end because what this shows is that the level of skill needed to be a housing counselor, right? Some of the soft skills, you have the resources and things that you can provide for clients, but a lot of what we're talking about is just the human experience, being able to recognize that the feelings that people have are not so far removed from feelings that you may have. And so we're going to talk about um, self-care. Let me go back, see if it'll allow me to go back. And this slide is pretty important. You are essential, and self-care is a necessity. I think I used the slide in the last training, but it is important for you to recognize that you are the main vehicle for this caller or this client. And so you matter just as much as the client does. And so making sure that you are taking care of yourself. So this picture represents your body. It's important to recognize how every call has an impact on every aspect of your body. So making sure that you are checking in with your body on a regular basis, asking yourself and asking your body, what do you need in this moment to take care of yourself? You just heard, someone talk about, their whole family dying and they're losing their home. And they have 2 days to get out of their house. um, that is going to be impactful on your body, so making sure that you're checking in with your body. um, and so there's lots of activities that you can do to ground yourself. I know at times when you're working you may not be able to ground yourself, but we're going to take just a few moments to do a quick grounding activity, and you can do it wherever you're at. Please, if you're driving, don't do this activity. I don't want any accidents on my watch, but the grounding activity is called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it allows you to center yourself. So you may have a call that just shook you, and you have some space and time before your next call. This would be a good activity for you to do. So I'm going to guide you through it now and just take a few responses on um, what you experienced from it. So if you would take a few deep breaths in this moment, and I will do the same, and then I'll guide you through this activity. So I want you to look around the room that you're in, and I want you to um, say out loud 5 things that you notice. Now I would like you to connect with your body, and say out loud 4 things that you feel. Next, I want you to say out loud 3 things that you hear. And then 2 things that you taste, or 2 things you would like to taste. And then 1 thing that you feel. And then I would like you to take a few more deep breaths. All right. And then reorient yourself and then type in the chat what you noticed as you were grounding yourself.
Okay, so people say I began to relax, being more present with my surroundings, felt control. Um, I agree with this one. I'm hungry. um, you said have like water and lunch. That's what I want to taste. Somebody said I calmed down. Somebody said I felt tired. My body became very relaxed, and I had trouble keeping my eyes open. Clarity. Somebody said it gives me a break from reality. Relaxed, focused, and calm. Um, my thoughts turn from negative to positive. Uh, Somebody says I do it in a different order. See, hear, feel, smell, taste. It definitely works to make me feel safe and grounded. That's
Mm,
awesome. My coworkers. Somebody said I heard my coworkers versus my thoughts for the first time.
mm.
Wow. Thank y'all for sharing.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. So this is something good that you can use. You can change the order. You but it does and will ground you if you need some grounding. So I'm going to continue on. Let's see here. Oh, this is a better way to use that. All right. So here's some quick and easy ways to take care of yourself. Asking for help. That is a self-care technique. Taking a step back, whether it's taking a step back from y- work, taking a step back from people, taking a step back. You can add what goes on the end of taking a step back. Forgiving yourself. Saying no, staying at home, setting boundaries, asking for what you need and want, putting yourself first, and spending time alone are all ways that you can practice self care. Here's some common self care responses, and I want you to think about these and think about if you use these. Self care response number one, I'll do it eventually. Um, I'll do it eventually means it probably won't get done. Um, I should have done that. So it talks about, what you should have done, but not focusing on what you can do. Um, the biggest one that I've noted is that I didn't have the time. I didn't have the time, and then I had to create the time when something tragic happens. So making sure that you're honoring yourself first. I could have, but tends to negate anything that you want to do. So making sure that if you're using these responses, that you start to change them so they are in support of you. All right. So self-care does require effort. Specifically, if you have not taken care of yourself and you don't find yourself being as important as others, it does require effort. Um, it can bring up feelings of guilt, feelings of frustration because perhaps you don't think you have the time or you don't have the resources, or you've been the one supporting everyone and they depend on you. So making sure that you recognize that self-care does bring up feelings. It can reveal the truth, and sometimes the truth hurts. It can reveal that you have not taken care of yourself ever in life. So one of the things you have to do is be able to own that, but it can reveal the truth. Self-care can also bring up family of origin issues, meaning perhaps your family did not take care of themselves, and that is a learned behavior for you. So keeping in mind, even though that may have been something that happened in your childhood, you can change the narrative to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. All right. So here's just some mindful morning routines that help you think about taking care of yourself, making sure you have something healthy to drink in the morning. whether it's tea or water or something that gets your energy going. Um, Make sure that you are managing your phone. Whether it's I'm going to not get on the phone the first thing in the morning, or managing how much distraction you have with technology. Um, if you have an opportunity to get up and get active in the morning, or during the day, make sure you're doing so. If you are a breakfast eater, eat a great breakfast, or if you're not a breakfast eater, make sure that you're eating or doing something that gives you energy. If you have an opportunity, another way that allows you to have some mindful morning routines is planning out your day. Having a direction oftentimes will give you some peace as you're going throughout your day. Here are just some 5 essential self-care strategies. We know that sleep kind of guides how our day is going to go. So make sure you're getting the adequate amount of sleep for you, that you have some type of exercise routine, some type of movement. You're thinking about, again, what it takes to fuel your body and manage all of the intel that you're taking in from your clients. It takes a lot of energy to hold space for clients that have grief and loss. So making sure that you recognize the foods that serve you well, and the food and decreasing the foods that decrease your energy. We all know the foods that make us really sleepy. And so you have to be aware on how to make sure that when you're sitting with clients that you're not um, taking in those foods. Um, Definitely relaxation and connection are some other strategies that are helpful as well. Any type of rituals included in self-care, whether it's acts of prayer, meditation, self-reflection, um, any mirroring rituals, and so reaching out to kindred spirits for support and inspiration, acts of self-care, taking care of yourself, having intimate circles that will increase your physical, emotional, and spiritual elements within your self-care routine, and then acts of service. If you're doing any type of volunteer work or working outside of your scope, sometimes that is energizing for those as well. So here's a picture that describes what happens if you are not taking care of yourself. This is actually the cover of my book called The Dumping Ground, but you see the lady, it could be a lady or a man, but whoever it is holding up their hands to kind of keep the trash from entering um, her space, her or his space. And so the other self-care technique that I think is very important is setting boundaries. If you don't set boundaries, you will become a dumping ground. So I'm going to give you some tools on how to set boundaries. I'm pretty passionate about boundary setting, which is why I created this resource. Um, but here's the reason why boundary setting is hard to do. For you as the housing counselor, it's important for you to have boundaries set in your life, and even boundaries with your clients. Sometimes you have to set boundaries to be able to support them. But these are some of the reasons why it's hard to do. You put others' feelings and needs first. Um, you don't know yourself well. You don't feel like you have the right to set a boundary. You believe that setting boundaries will jeopardize a relationship or a client, or you may be fearful to set a boundary, or you never really learn how to set boundaries. These are some of the reasons why we as individuals have a difficult time setting boundaries. Signs that you may need to set a boundary. I really need to stop working so much. That may be a reason why you need to set a boundary. Every time I hang out with this person, I always feel drained and I'm in a bad mood afterwards. Another reason is she keeps asking me, she or he keeps asking me to hang out with her on Sundays when I'd rather take my alone time. So again, these are some signs that you may need to set some boundaries. Signs of ignored boundaries would be over enmeshment, when you are just kind of connected, and you're not able to disconnect. If you're starting to disassociate, maybe disconnecting from your feelings and acting like nothing is going on. Excessive detachment is another area. Victimhood. If you feel invisible and you're always complaining about being invisible, you may need to set some boundaries. And then if you have a difficult time with lack of privacy, you're not able to assert yourself to get the privacy that you need. These are some other signs that you may have some ignored boundaries. Here's some tools to help you enforce boundaries. You want to have clear agreements with people. They need to understand what your boundaries are, and so there won't be any confusion on your limits. You want to be confident in yourself in knowing that you have a right to set a boundary. You want to have a commitment to your goals. So if you have set this boundary, that is a goal for you, making sure that you're honoring yourself first. An air of your ownership. You own your boundary. You own if you break the boundary. So you have to be able to be the one that takes responsibilities for your boundaries. You also want to make sure that you speak up in an assertive manner and not an aggressive manner. What happens a lot of times if you're not able to set boundaries and you are pushed, you begin to become more aggressive. So you want to make sure that you're speaking up initially, to be able to set your boundaries. You want to make sure that you're suspending privileges. So making sure if someone violates boundaries, that you are suspending privileges and setting additional boundaries to make sure that you're protecting yourself. Sometimes you have to be able to withdraw from people, places, or things, and then sometimes you have to be able to denounce it if someone has violated a boundary. So these are some tools to help you enforce your boundaries. Backup ways to set boundaries, making sure that you are honoring the promises to yourself. You want to make sure that you have some accountability partners or people who can help you align with the boundaries that you set for yourself. On-call help would be, if you need to have a counselor or a coach or a pastor or a spiritual friend to be able to kind of talk to you about the boundaries that you set. And then any personal power sources. It could be prayer, meditation, anything that you use as a ritual to set boundaries. These are some backup ways to do that. Here's some helpful phrases to say no. No can be difficult at times, but it's important to be able to say no when necessary. So I am going to share these phrases here. I can't give you an answer right now. Will you check back with me? You can use this in place of saying no if you're unable to say no. I want to, but I am unable to. I really appreciate you asking me, but I can't do it. I understand you need my help, but I'm just not able to say yes to that. I am sorry. I'm going to say no for now. I'll let you know if something changes. I'm honored that you would ask me, but my answer is no. No, I can't do that, but here's what I can do. I just don't have that to give right now. And those are the ways that you say no. So, as we get ready to close, I want to end with us thinking about and sharing, what do you do to take care of yourself and what things do you need to work on? And so Chrissy's going to monitor the question box, and we're going to share some of the things that we're doing and things that we need to work on so we can better serve the clients that we come in contact with.
All right, I got people already there. I practice hot yoga 3 to 4 times a week. Somebody said I need to work on taking care of myself. Then I have a sad face saying nothing. So we encourage you to find a way to take care of yourself. Someone said pray, meditate, exercise. Somebody said I definitely need to start saying no. Take a walk, listen to relaxing music, say no more often, eat right, take time to pray. Um, Somebody said I don't have time for anything, and I'll let you speak to that, Tasha, when we finish. I need more me time. Prioritize yourself. Uh, Somebody said, how do I say no without feeling the guilt?
Mm.
Uh, yeah, but a lot of prayer, meditation, walking, and finding a way to move. Somebody said, and I think it's an awesome thing, is avoid the high stress news.
Mm.
Uh, Sometimes you just have to shut off some things in order to turn on other things. Um, so that's what we're hearing. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll turn it back over to you if you have a closing comment before I close us out for today.
Yes, yes. I will say that you all are amazing, and the work that you are doing to support clients is some heavy lifting. And so, for those that talked about the guilt and not having the time, I would say to you that if you find yourself not having time, I would check in with your alignment and making sure that the things in your life align with your core values and making sure that you are operating in your authentic truth. Um, the person who talked about the guilt, and this could be just a whole workshop on this as well, is that guilt is a feeling that has to be resolved on in a separate setting, but making sure that you give yourself space for guilt, but knowing that you can still move forward with a guilty feeling. I think that sometimes our feelings kind of get in the way of us continuing to move forward, um, but making sure that if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to serve these clients or even serve your families or live the fulfilling life that you deserve. So, um, again, I wanted to just leave you with those comments. But again, thank you for your time today and your attention to the effective tools that you need to be able to support the clients that you serve. So I appreciate the work that you're doing.
All right, thank you so much for being here, Tasha. We've only got about a minute, maybe minute and a half left. If you all have any remaining questions that you have, feel free to take a moment, drop them in the question box, and I will read those and we'll respond to those according. Thank you so much for being here. Please keep us on your list. We've got some webinars coming up in October. The final FICO score fundamental will be next week. We have how to engage your online audience, and we also have a HUD rental moratorium update coming up in November, and one more HUD 9902, the nuts and bolts of how to get that document completed correctly. So we've got definitely 4 or 5 more webinars before we turn to the Thanksgiving season here. So please visit us. Sign up when you get the invitations and the links. We certainly appreciate you being here and look forward to seeing you and serving you again soon. We thank our partners for making all of this possible. And just want to remind you to take a minute to fill out the survey. Let us know what you're thinking, what we are doing well, what we need to change, and what you're looking to see as we look forward into 2022. And I will make sure that I get the recording out to you all today. All right. Thank you all. We appreciate your attention. Have a great afternoon.